Thought for 28s. The day my husband watched a rattler bite me and then kept walking. The desert tried to finish what he started. And that was the same day a quiet man with a scar along his jaw put his mouth to my ankle and gave me back a life I wasn't even sure I wanted. Yeah, that happened. And before you ask, no, I didn't imagine the smile on my husband's face when he took the last canteen and the little silver locket my mother left me, and said nothing at all as he turned east and shrank in a heat shimmer like a lie dissolving in sunlight. My name then was Nora Hale, Arizona Territory, 1884. Sky so big it made you small, earth cracked like old china. Our wagon dead on a dry trail with one wheel kicked to splinters, and a man named Mason Pike grinding his teeth at me as if my breath burned his rations. 2 years of his affection turning thick and sour, blame poured like tar, for the lame horse, for the failed claim up in Prescott. Until I stepped into a patch of brittle scrub to gather what wouldn't burn and felt that sharp stitch of fire in my ankle, 2 needles quick as gossip. Felt the world tilt and the earth roll up to meet me while a diamond pattern slid away and the air filled with a dry, angry rattle that was somehow louder than my own heartbeat. I called him, not by the names I'd learned to keep to myself, just Mason, small as a prayer, and he came slow, not worried, but his hands, and walked, boots steady, back toward the idea of a town, and every step he took seemed to pull the shade farther from the sun, and that's how I was left. Name of Eli Caro, shoulders like a doorway, eyes the color of river stones when the current slows, a widower 5 years deep by the way he carried silence around like a tool he knew how to use. And he saw the swell of my leg and the purple rage creeping toward my knee, and he said sorry to a stranger as if I were kin, then set his knife like a pin and drew 2 small lines across the bite. Lowered his head, did the one hard thing decent men sometimes do without waiting for applause, spat and drew and spat again until the taste of poison lived in his face more than mine. Then gave me the last of his canteen and set me in the saddle in front of him like I weighed less than what he hadn't said in years. I came back slow, 3 days of fever that held me under. Wood smoke and willow tea and a deep voice I couldn't hold on to. Words like rocks in a stream I kept slipping off. Easy, you're safe, drink. And somewhere in that heat I said my husband's name and the wagon and the sky breaking, and I remember a cool cloth and a bowl that tasted of bone and thyme. And when the world finally cleared it did it all at once, a little cabin, 2 rooms, a stone hearth, a peg rail with a woman's shawl folded like a memory on the end. And the days took on a rhythm that felt like breathing after a long run, the kind of breath that shakes and then smooths. He brought in wood, and I mended shirts with clumsy little stitches that somehow held. He checked the well, and I set dough to rise in a tin that had fed better times. He'd say, legs looking less angry, and I'd say, feels like it. And between us moved respect so plain it embarrassed me to think how strange it felt to be treated like a person and not a problem. Where you can name the shade on the porch and the hawk that circles at 4 each afternoon. A month passed, the bruising faded to yellow, and a peddler came along the road with a cart of tin spoons and foolish lace. Name of Silas Boone, one eye like polished coin and the other a little sleepy from too much sun. Cried real good at the bar after, bought himself a shirt, even flashed a locket he swore he'd found under a rock, and I felt something inside me settle, not grief, not hate. Just a kind of alignment like when a wheel finally sits back on its axle and you know the ride's going to be different now. I started sleeping without waking at every coyote yip. Eli began speaking of Martha by name. Not much, just little things. How she could mend a fence with baling wire and 3 curses. How she believed beans needed patience more than salt. And one dusk he said, soft as evening, some things can be mended and some can't, and a man had better know the difference. And I set my needle down and said, I'm still here. And that was all, but it felt like more. Then the buggy came, heat lifting behind it like a mirage that refused to stay false. Sheriff Dugan driving, hat tired, mustache like a broom that had seen too many floors, and next to him my husband, cleaned up and smug as a fence post painted on only one side. Calling me my darling, before his boots hit dirt, arms open like the mouth of a well you know is dry, and Eli stepped down from the porch into the space between me and the world, no gun drawn. Grief like rain. And the sheriff listened because listening is his job, even when the words track like a coyote with two left feet. And I said no. Not loud. Just true, told him the rattler. The canteen, the locket, the eastbound back. And Dugan looked like a man trying to add 2 and getting 3. And then I said, ask him for the locket. And Mason's face twitched in the spot where lies sweat first. He called me fevered, said I wasn't right, said Eli had taken advantage. And he tried to come up the steps like the house itself belonged to him by law of marriage and habit. She's not going anywhere with you. Eli said, no gravel in it, just bedrock. And the air went very clear. Hawk cry, hoarse breath, a loose board clicking on the trough, and Sheriff Dugan put his hand on his hip like a man feeling for the truth, and said, careful now. Maybe a little attempt at murder when you step away from your only water and leave a woman for buzzards. And he told Mason he'd be riding with him for a talk that would take all afternoon, and the buggy turned like the world had turned and the dust settled just the way dust is designed to do. Silence came back different. Like the room after a song has ended, and you can still hear it without sound. And I sat on the porch step because my knees didn't quite remember how to hold me up, and Eli sat beside me, but didn't touch. Respect still running like a second creek near the first. And when I finally said, it's over, he said, for now. And that was right, because paper is strong in town and men like Mason know how to sharpen it. You know what I mean. And yet the evening looked like a promise anyway. Sky bruising to plum, light lying soft on the corral rails. A faint smell of coffee lifting like a small prayer. I told him I had nowhere to go, and he said I was already home, not the kind of sentence that asks for an answer. And I looked at his hand, rough as bark, and put mine on it the way you lay a palm on a warm horse, slow so nobody spooks. And he turned his hand and threaded his fingers with mine, and the porch chose that moment to stop creaking and the wind to ease and the hawk to settle somewhere beyond the cottonwoods. And for a heartbeat, the whole territory felt held together by something stronger than wire. Next morning, we swept the porch and pinned a statement for the sheriff with Silas Boone's name on it because. And we also talked about staying put because some days peace is an animal you don't chase or it won't come close. And if you're asking whether Eli and I spoke promises after that, we didn't. Not right away. We let the work say it for us. Fence lines mended, seeds pressed into dry earth that surprised us by giving back. 2 tin mugs set side by side on the fence each dusk like a pair of small, sturdy lanterns. And if you want the picture that lives in my chest, it's me stepping down into the yard at sunset with my shadow and his stretching long, the wagon scars still on the trail. The law may be rolling our way again with a fresh idea of what a wife is worth on paper, a dust thread in the distance that could be trouble or could be nothing at all, and me not running this time. Standing in a doorway I can name by sound, thinking that some things are mended and some aren't, and you live honest in the space between, understand, but the desert keeps its secrets. And men like Mason learn new tricks when the first ones fail, and the wind can change, and somewhere a rattler coils again. And that's the truth that keeps the ending open, because out here nothing ever lands for good. It just circles and settles and rises and circles again. If you were there on that porch with us, watching the light go gold and the law figure out what kind of story it wanted to tell next, what would you call right? What would you call wrong? Where does justice live? In a badge, in a promise.